Good morning, Trump's family. Thank you for always watching and subscribing to the channel. God bless each and every one of you. Let's just jump right in, folks. There's plenty of things to talk about. And Republicans should be taking notes on how to defeat Democrats, especially Democrats who currently are holding office, people like Gretchen Whitmer, for example. All you have to do is point back to their disastrous record on COVID. And their handling of COVID, what they've done to the state, the communities and people, and continue to hammer that home to the voters out there who are looking to vote for somebody that isn't going to destroy their livelihoods. And this is a great blueprint. We've seen this tactic already utilized elsewhere. Herschel Walker did this against Raph Warnock, Kari Lake doing this against Katie Hobbs. Hopefully that AWS will do this against Fetterman as well. This is a great tactic, and this moment right here, I believe, has Tudor Dixon winning the Michigan governorship with this moment. This is by far to the point of what Gretchen Whitmer is responsible for in the state of Michigan. And Tudor Dixon did a wonderful job highlighting that again. I was not a very big fan of Tudor Dixon, but she is the Republican who is running for that office out there. And she is leagues better than Gretchen Whitmer. So let's go ahead and take a listen to what took place during the debate the other night, where Tudor Dixon actually pressed, and this should be the blueprint once again, on how you handle these Democrats who have destroyed this country time and time again over the last few years. So let's kind of dive into it here. This is from the election debate the other night. Let's take a listen to how Tudor Dixon went to work. Everyone listen to this, she said. Well, the governor wants you to believe that she did listen to the experts. But we have the letter from the Nursing Home Association that said whatever you do, don't send COVID-positive patients into nursing homes. And yet the governor did. When Andrew Cuomo even backed off of this, Governor Whitmer doubled down. She even tried to hide the final report of the numbers of how many deaths we had. In fact, she's tried to hide a lot from this pandemic. She tried to hide, or she did hide effectively, why her Department of Health and Human Services director left. In fact, she even paid them off with a secrecy agreement. The same with unemployment. What a debacle to have $8.5 billion fraudulently sent out. Now I've got people bringing bills from the state up to me, begging me to forgive the unemployment that she's trying to get out back, because she accidentally sent $8.5 billion out. And what about our students that she kept locked out of schools, and wouldn't listen to parents when they begged her to let them play? Let them play? She wouldn't even listen. Fantastic debt, my friends, is how it's done. She was on point on this whole debate. During that exchange, Gretchen Woodward could not answer a core. She did a lot of blame shifting, and Tudor Dixon's right on point, reminding the voters once again of the disastrous policies that led to tens of thousands of deaths in the state of Michigan in the elderly community, because of nursing homes debacle that Gretchen Whitmer knew would end in a disaster, and she continued to do it anyway. And of course, not to mention all the communities that were destroyed by her enhanced COVID lockdowns, where cops are visiting residential areas, have parents who were letting their kids play together, and telling them they weren't able to do that. That is a disastrous policies. That is Gretchen Whitmer, and right in that point right there, I believe Tudor Dixon has won Michigan. And, well, exactly as expected. It's happening, folks. John Fetterman hasn't budged in the polls for months. He's been under that 50-point line for a real long time, and he just hasn't been able to break through that ceiling. Well, folks, it seems as though that ceiling is dropping, and we haven't even seen the real impacts of that MSNBC expose as of yet. I mean, we're seeing little remnants of it, but it's really going to take some time to materialize. But the simple fact of the matter is John Fetterman campaign is crashing. And the most recent Trafalgar Group poll not only shows John Fetterman lead reducing, but it shows Dr. Oz catching up, and he's essentially within the margin of error. And that doesn't even account for independents and undecided voters who are most likely going to split for him, and the voter enthusiasm gap. Of course, I'm not going to rehash those points, because we've done all the polling analysis. But the basic point here is that John Fetterman continues to crash and Dr. Oz is gaining on him. It's exactly what we were expecting, considering all the bad news and the bad moves that the John Fetterman campaign has been making. We've been reporting that they are in serious panic mode. Well, folks, that panic mode just turned into an emergency declaration, as the Fetterman campaign is straight up freaking out. And boy, when you get emotional, when you get desperate, sometimes you don't exactly make the most sound of decisions. And John Fetterman, as campaign this time through his wife, just made a serious blunder. Let me show you guys exactly what's going on as the Fetterman campaign continues to tank. This is 2 weeks straight of PR blunders and campaign disasters. Alright, folks. So let's first start off with the numbers here. John Fetterman's campaign is officially tanking in the most recent Trafalgar poll. His ceiling drops down to 47.2%. Dr. Oz gains at 44.8%. That's a 2.4% lead for John Fetterman, right within the margin of error, and you have 4% undecided and 3.4% for the Libertarian candidate, I believe Eric Gerhardt. And so clearly the question is a 2.4% leave for John Fetterman enough to win in Pennsylvania, considering the undecided split, considering the fact that the Libertarian candidate might not get 3.4%? And of course, the most important factor, people actually showing up to the polls? I don't think so. If you look at the most recent Rasmussen poll, where Republicans make massive gains in generic congressional ballot data, specifically isolated for the state of Pennsylvania, Republicans are leading in generic ballot votes at 48% to 43%. And if we look at independents across the country, 2022 generic congressional ballot polling trends by Rasmussen on September 29. That was 38% for Democrats, 37% for Republicans. Fast forward 2 weeks later, Republicans hold a plus 16 lead at 46% to 30%. For the Dems, considering the fact that Pennsylvania voters are leaning rightward, how the heck does it then make sense for Pennsylvania voters to then go and vote for John Fetterman? Not only is he one of the most far, but to add insult to injury, to make it even worse, he's unhealthy, and Pennsylvania voters know that, and increasingly so after the most recent MSNBC report. Clearly it's not looking good for John Fetterman, his campaign, and they know it. And now, as I was mentioning, after that MSNBC piece, we expose day into John Fetterman as hell. Well, the emotional and desperate reaction from John Fetterman's wife, and his campaign is another campaign PR blunder disaster. John Fetterman's wife just came out publicly claiming that Dasha Burns, the reporter who broke the story on John Fetterman, his fitness for office, or lack thereof, should, quote, face consequences after going live with a piece. Everyone listen to this, she said. I don't like saying rage because I think that's a really unhealthy feeling. And when you feel those things, not only harms yourself, but what, at the surface, that she did to not only my husband, but anyone facing a disability and working through it. And I don't know how there were not consequences, right? There are consequences for folks in these positions. Who are any of the isms? She was ableist. And that's what she was in her interview. It was appalling to the entire disability community. And I think to journalism, so I was shocked. I'm still really upset about it. And I think the positive is it's brought a lot of conversations around accommodations around ableism. Right. Ableism was trending on Twitter. It just shows there's so much work to do, but these networks have to take accountability, right? Like, where is your training? It was appalling to see, and you see that in schools. You see that with young children. You don't expect to see it at this level. And I haven't heard an apology. It hasn't come. I am hopeful that there will reflect and see that they did an incredible disservice to all Americans. Wow. Now that is not only appalling, but it's also just so cringy. Ableism taking the disingenuous woke approach to call for consequences against Dasha Burns, who was merely doing her job and reporting on basic facts. Her stance is that Dasha Burns did a disservice to the voters and viewers by honestly and openly reporting on the clear facts of John Fetterman's health. That's the stance that you want to take. I wouldn't advise it. I'd advise against it. I'd say that's probably not a good idea. But if that's what you believe, then fine. But then for John Fetterman, his wife, to suggest that she should face consequences for practicing journalism gives us a direct view into the mind of an authoritarian leftist. And then, of course, to justify it with some woke nonsense once again gives us a direct view into what Dr. Jordan Peterson is always warning us about with the compassionate leftist, authoritarian. It's just not a good look. And it's similar to what we're seeing with Katie Hobbs. This idea that voters don't deserve to see the truth about their candidates. It's all just completely ridiculous, and it's clearly going to backfire. It's a really bad look. People are already discussing this clip, and the overwhelming majority of the comments that I'm seeing, of course this is anecdotal, find her statements to be completely absurd, ridiculous, and I'd say rightfully so. But at the end of the day, It all signals one thing: total absolute sheer panic coming out of the John Fetterman house, and of course John Fetterman campaign. They don't know what to do. They're scrambling, and it's everybody but John Fetterman. But speaking for John Fetterman, which makes the optics even worse, John Fetterman can't even come out publicly and defend himself, because of the damage that he has suffered after the stroke. The whole thing is falling apart, and you know that they're getting seriously desperate when they're launching a last-minute Hail Mary desperate attempt to turn this thing around by calling on Joe Biden to campaign for John Fetterman. It's happening. Dementia Joe will go to Pennsylvania to stump for stroke victim John Fetterman. I mean, honestly, with this one, the jokes write themselves. I think I'm gonna refrain on this issue specifically, but let's just say John Fetterman and Joe Biden, not exactly an all-star lineup when it comes to public events, public speaking. This is, as I stated, a last-second, last-ditch effort. This is pure desperation. And again, I think it's going to flop very simply, because Joe Biden is incredibly unpopular in the state of Pennsylvania, and even more unpopular with independent voters, that you're currently trying to convince Trump leads Biden in Pennsylvania 2024 poll. Donald Trump is beating Joe Biden by a staggering amount in Pennsylvania across all of the most reputable pollsters, and John Fetterman's strategy here to turn this around, or the Fetterman campaign strategy, is to bring Sleepy Joe to resurrect his campaign again. Not a good look. It's PR blunder, campaign blunder after blunder from the crime campaign, that backfired on John Fetterman tremendously to brand himself as a law and order candidate, and then everything in between to now. This John Fetterman election efforts are spiraling out of control. And pretty soon, folks, the whole thing's going to implode. I don't see this guy winning on election day, and certainly not after the late October debate. But of course, we'll just have to see what happens. I mean, really, the ball's in Dr. Oz's court. We'll just have to see what he does with it. But when it comes to John Fetterman, it's been airball after airball, one big massive disaster. Thank you very much. WWG1WGA. Give me your thoughts below and hit subscribe.